The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Rosewood Manor ballroom, where champagne flutes clinked and laughter echoed off the gilded walls. Ruby Martinez adjusted her black server's uniform for the 100th time that evening, her hands trembling slightly as she balanced a silver tray laden with appetizers. At 23, she had perfected the art of invisibility, keeping her head down, moving efficiently between tables and avoiding eye contact. With the wealthy guests who barely acknowledged her existence, this engagement party was different from her usual catering gigs. The bride-to-be, Victoria Sterling, came from old money, and her guest list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Ruby needed this job desperately. Her younger brother's medical bills were mounting, and their small apartment's rent was already 2 weeks overdue. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes tonight. The evening had been proceeding smoothly until she heard a voice that made her blood turn to ice. That laugh, sharp, mocking, unforgettable, cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. Ruby's heart hammered against her ribs as she slowly turned toward the sound. Praying she was wrong, she wasn't. Standing near the ornate fireplace, wine glass in hand and designer dress hugging her perfectly sculpted figure, was Jessica Chunher. High school tormentor, the girl who had made Ruby's teenage years a living nightmare. Jessica looked even more polished now, her black hair swept into an elegant chignon, diamonds glittering at her throat. She was gesturing animatedly to a group of women, no doubt regaling them with some story that would end in cruel laughter. Ruby's palms grew slick with sweat as memories flooded back, Jessica shoving her into lockers, spreading vicious rumors about her family's financial struggles, orchestrating elaborate pranks that left Ruby humiliated in front of the entire school. The worst part had been Jessica's ability to turn everyone against her, isolating Ruby until she ate lunch alone in empty classrooms and dreaded walking the hallways. More champagne over here? Someone called out, jolting Ruby back to the present. She forced herself to move, but her legs felt like lead. Jessica hadn't noticed her yet, but it was only a matter of time. The ballroom suddenly felt claustrophobic despite its grand proportions. Ruby's breath came in short gasps as panic began to set in. She had to get out of sight, at least until she could collect herself. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape route that wouldn't draw attention. The kitchen was too far, and the hallway would require walking directly past Jessica's group. Then she spotted it, the long desert table draped with ivory linen that puddled on the floor, creating a perfect hiding space underneath. Without thinking, Ruby ducked down and crawled beneath the table, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The space under the desert table was cramped and dimly lit, filled with the sweet aroma of chocolate truffles and vanilla cream. Ruby pressed her back against the cool wall, trying to steady her breathing while her mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if Jessica saw her? What if she caused a scene? Ruby couldn't afford to lose this job, not when her family was counting on her. She was so lost in her spiraling thoughts that she didn't notice the rustling of the tablecloth until a hand appeared, followed by a man's confused face. Back a gasp as the stranger crawled under the table beside her, his expensive suit now wrinkled from the awkward maneuvering. "Well, this is unexpected," he whispered, his voice carrying a hint of amusement despite the bizarre situation. In the soft glow filtering through the linen, Ruby could make out warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile that seemed genuine rather than mocking. "I'm sorry," Ruby stammered, starting to crawl away. "I'll go. I was just, hey." "Wait," the man said gently, holding up his hand. "I'm not going to rat you out or anything. I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Webb." He held up a small camera lens cap. "Dropped this little guy and followed it down here. Didn't expect to find company." Ruby studied his face, searching for signs of ridicule or judgment, but found only curiosity and concern. "Ruby," she whispered reluctantly. "Nice to meet you, Ruby. So not to pry, but people don't usually take refuge under dessert tables unless something's wrong. Are you okay?" The genuine concern in his voice nearly undid her. Ruby felt tears prick at her eyes as she shook her head. "There's someone out there who made my life hell in high school. I can't face her. Not here, not dressed like this, not when she's clearly doing so well and I'm just... She gestured helplessly at her server's uniform. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. High school bullies have a way of shrinking us back to our teenage selves, don't they? Even when we've grown and changed, they can make us feel small again. Exactly, Ruby breathed, surprised by his understanding. Jessica was relentless. She made me feel like I was nothing, like I didn't deserve to exist in the same space as her. And now here she is, probably friends with the bride, fitting in. Perfectly, while I'm hiding under a table like a coward. You're not a coward, Marcus said firmly. You're human. And whoever this Jessica is, she doesn't get to dictate your worth or your right to be here. Ruby felt something shift inside her, just a tiny spark of warmth in the cold fear that had consumed her. There was something about Marcus that felt safe, like a calm harbor in a storm. "What do you do here?" she asked, noticing his professional camera hanging around his neck. "I'm the photographer," Marcus replied, documenting all the joy and pretense. In equal measure, his eyes twinkled with gentle humor. "And you're working the event?" Ruby nodded, feeling shame color her cheeks. "Catering. I need the money." "Nothing wrong with honest work," Marcus said simply. And Ruby realized he truly meant it. Marcus had photographed dozens of high society events, and he'd developed a keen eye for reading people. The woman beside him Ruby wasn't hiding from embarrassment or social anxiety. There was real fear in her eyes, the kind that came from deep wounds that hadn't properly healed. As a photographer, he'd learned to see beyond surface appearances, and what he saw in Ruby was someone who had been systematically torn down but was fighting to rebuild herself. "You know," Marcus said thoughtfully, adjusting his position in the confined space, "I've been photographing events like this for 5 years, and I can tell you something interesting. The people who belong here the least are often the ones who act like they own the place." Ruby looked at him questioningly, and he continued, "I mean the ones who are cruel to staff, who look down on anyone they perceive as beneath them. They're usually the most insecure people in the room. True confidence doesn't need to tear others down. It's a nice philosophy," Ruby said with a bitter smile. "But it doesn't change the fact that Jessica Chen is out there living her best life while I'm cowering under furniture." "Tell me about her," Marcus said. "What made her so terrible?" Ruby's hands clenched into fists as the memories surfaced. "She had this way of finding your weakest spot and pressing on it until you broke. My family didn't have money. My dad worked construction. My mom cleaned houses. Jessica would make sure everyone knew. She'd accidentally spill things on my secondhand clothes, start rumors about my family, exclude me from everything." Marcus listened intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. "There was this one time," Ruby continued, her voice barely audible. "She threw a party and invited everyone in our class except me, but she made sure I knew about it. Posted photos online, tagged everyone, made it clear I was the only one not welcome. I spent that night crying in my room while scrolling through pictures of people I thought were my friends having the time of their lives without me. It's not just mean," Marcus said quietly. "That's calculated cruelty. The worst part was how she made me doubt myself. I started believing maybe I really was pathetic. Maybe I didn't deserve friends or happiness. It took years of therapy to undo that damage, and even now," Ruby gestured at their hiding spot, "even now, she can reduce me to this." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking. As a photographer, he'd captured thousands of moments, some genuine, some performed. He'd learned to distinguish between authentic emotion and manufactured drama. What he was hearing from Ruby felt heartbreakingly real. "Can I tell you something?" he said finally. "In my experience, people like Jessica peak in high school. They spend the rest of their lives trying to recapture that time when their cruelty gave them power. But people like you grow. You become more than they ever imagined possible." "Easy for you to say," Ruby replied. "You're not the one serving hors d'oeuvres to your former tormentor." "No," Marcus agreed. "But I am the one who's spent the last 10 minutes talking to someone with genuine kindness, real depth, and the courage to work hard for what she needs. Meanwhile, your Jessica is out there performing for people who would drop her the moment she stopped being useful to them." Ruby felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't entirely from pain. When was the last time someone had seen her this clearly spoken to her with such respect? I should get back to work, she whispered. I can't afford to lose this job. I have an idea, Marcus said, his eyes brightening with sudden inspiration. But I need you to trust me. Do you trust me? Ruby studied his face in the dim light. Every instinct told her to stay hidden, to wait until Jessica left. But something about Marcus made her want to be brave. What did you have in mind? Marcus's plan was audacious, and as he explained it in hushed whispers under the desert table, Ruby felt her heart alternate between racing with excitement and stopping with terror. The idea was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution, instead of hiding from her past. She would face it head not as the broken teenager Jessica remembered, but as the woman she had become. You're insane, Ruby whispered, but there was a spark in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe Marcus grinned. But sometimes insane is exactly what the situation calls for. Besides, I've got your back. Literally, I'll be right beside you. The sound of Jessica's distinctive laugh grew closer, and Ruby realized her hiding time was running out anyway. Someone would eventually need something from under the dessert table. Or worse, Jessica might spot her when she inevitably had to emerge. Better to take control of the narrative than be discovered cowering. Okay, Ruby breathed, surprising herself. Let's do it. Marcus smiled broadly. That's the spirit. Remember, you belong here just as much as anyone else. You're not that scared teenager anymore? They synchronized their emergence, Marcus going first and then extending his hand to help Ruby up. As she grasped his fingers and rose from beneath the table, Ruby felt as though she were surfacing from deep water, breaking through into lightened air.
Ow.
The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the hunched, fearful posture of the hiding server. In its place stood a young woman, with her chin raised and shoulders squared. The timing was perfect, or perhaps perfectly terrible, depending on perspective. Jessica had been moving toward their section of the room, wine glass in hand, when Ruby appeared as if by magic from beneath the dessert table. The recognition was instant and mutual. God, Jessica gasped, her perfectly composed expression cracking for just a moment before reassembling into a mask of surprised delight. Ruby Martinez, is that really you? The surrounding conversations quieted as heads turned toward the unfolding drama. Ruby felt every eye in their section of the ballroom focused on her, waiting to see how this encounter would play out. In the old days, this would have been her worst nightmare. But Marcus's steady presence beside her gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Hello, Jessica, Ruby said calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. What a surprised to see you here, Jessica continued, her tone dripping with false sweetness. Are you working the event? The question was designed to embarrass, to highlight the difference in their social positions. I am, Ruby replied. Without shame, honest work pays the bills. Marcus watched this exchange with growing admiration. Ruby wasn't just surviving this encounter. She was handling it with a grace and dignity that put Jessica's manufactured superiority to shame. How? ... Nice, Jessica said, clearly thrown off by Ruby's composed response. She had expected tears, stammering, maybe even grateful subservience. Instead, she was facing a woman who refused to be diminished. And you are. Marcus stepped forward slightly, extending his hand to Jessica with professional politeness. Jessica Chen, she replied, automatically shaking his hand while studying him with calculating eyes. And you're the photographer, I assume? Marcus Webb, he confirmed. I've been having the most fascinating conversation with Ruby here. She's got quite a story. Jessica's smile became slightly strained. Oh, I'm sure she does. Went to high school together, you know. Ruby was always so ... memorable. The word was chosen carefully, loaded with implications that everyone in earshot would understand. But before Jessica could elaborate or Ruby could respond, something unexpected happened that would change the entire dynamic of the evening. What happened next sent shockwaves through the ballroom and became the story that would be whispered about in social circles for months to come. As Jessica prepared to launch into what was clearly going to be a humiliating anecdote about their high school days, the bride herself, Victoria Sterling, approached their group with a purposeful stride. "Ruby!" Victoria exclaimed with genuine warmth, surprising everyone within earshot. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The confusion was palpable. Jessica's mouth fell open. Marcus raised an eyebrow, and Ruby herself looked stunned. It's Victoria, resplendent in a flowing silver gown that probably cost more than Ruby made in 6 months, embraced her as though they were old friends. "I'm sorry, but do you two know each other?" Jessica managed to stammer, her social compass spinning wildly. "Know each other?" Victoria laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Literally saved my life. Literally." The circle of onlookers grew larger as Victoria's voice carried across the ballroom. Ruby felt dizzy with shock. She had no idea what Victoria was talking about. "I'm sorry," Ruby said quietly, "but I think you might have me confused with someone else. Ruby Martinez, right? You work at St. Mary's Hospital in the evening shift?" Victoria's eyes sparkled with tears of gratitude. 3 months ago, you were cleaning the cardiac wing when you found my grandmother collapsed in the hallway after visiting hours. You performed CPR until the medical team arrived." The memory hit Ruby like a lightning bolt. The elderly woman in the expensive coat, clutching her chest, gasping for air. Ruby had just finished mopping the floors when she heard the faint cry for help. She hadn't thought twice. Her first aid training had kicked in automatically. "You're Victoria Sterling," Ruby whispered, the pieces clicking into place. "Mrs. Sterling. Was your grandmother?" "Is my grandmother," Victoria corrected with a radiant smile. "The doctors said if you hadn't found her when you did, if you hadn't known what to do," she trailed off, wiping away a tear. The gathered crowd murmured with amazement. Marcus watched Jessica's face cycle through a range of emotions: shock, confusion, and what looked like dawning horror as she realized the implications of what was unfolding. "But why didn't you say anything when you saw me working here tonight?" Ruby asked, still processing this revelation. "I didn't recognize you at first in the uniform," Victoria admitted. "But when I finally did, I wanted to find the perfect moment to thank you properly. I had no idea you were hiding under my dessert table." She laughed again, the sound infectious. "Ruby has always been full of surprises," Jessica interjected desperately, trying to regain control of the narrative. "Even in high school, she was so ... unpredictable." Victoria turned to Jessica with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, though. Expression wealthy women perfected when dealing with social climbers, and you are. "Jessica Chen, Ruby and I went to school together. I was just telling everyone about some of our ... shared memories." "How wonderful," Victoria said coolly. "I'm sure they're lovely memories, considering what a remarkable person Ruby is." The dismissal was subtle, but unmistakable. Marcus seized the moment. "Ruby was just telling me about her photography interests," he said smoothly. "I think she has real potential." "Photography?" Victoria's interest was immediately piqued. "How marvelous." "You know, I'm on the board of the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. We have a scholarship program for emerging artists." Ruby felt the world spinning around her. An hour ago, she had been hiding under a table, paralyzed by fear and shame. Now, she was standing in the center of the most elegant party she'd ever attended, being celebrated by the bride and offered opportunities she'd never dared dream of. I don't know what to say," Ruby managed. "Say you'll let me help," Victoria replied warmly. "It's the least I can do for the woman who gave me back my grandmother." As the crowd gradually dispersed, buzzing with excitement about the evening's unexpected turn, Jessica found herself standing alone, her moment of anticipated triumph transformed into social suicide. She had come to the party expecting to encounter a broken, easily dismissed server. Instead, she had witnessed the elevation of someone she had tried so hard to destroy. Marcus leaned close to Ruby's ear. "Still think hiding under tables is your only option?" Ruby looked at him with wonder and gratitude. "Do you know what the strangest part is? For the first time in my life, I feel like I really do belong here." "That's because you always did," Marcus replied softly. "You just needed to believe it yourself." As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Ruby realized that sometimes the moments that terrify us most become the doorways to everything we never knew we deserved. She had ducked under that table to hide from her past, But what happened next had revealed her future bright, bold and beautiful beyond her wildest dreams.